Hey, Michael, this is John Baza.
Hi, John. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to let you know that talking to Chairman Hansen, we're going to go right into the Environmental Excellence Award presentations. So he'll turn the time directly over to Holly Brown, and I won't have anything to say during the morning briefing.
Okay.
Good morning. This is the time and place for the Wednesday, April 28th, 2021 Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining hearing. Before we start, I need to read the electronic meeting determination. I'll do that now. I, Chris Hansen, Chairman of the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining, have determined the April 2021 public meeting will be held electronically. This determination is based on the following facts. Utah continues to be affected by the COVID-19 global pandemic. Although Salt Lake County has entered a moderate transmission phase, the Utah Department of Health has issued State Public Health Order 2021-7, which contains certain protocols directed at controlling the spread of the COVID-19 virus by minimizing face-to-face interactions. At this time, the physical space utilized for public meetings within the Utah DNR building is insufficient to maintain effective social distancing, and the board is unable to ensure proper safety protocols are in place to guarantee safe participation to the public. The board has been using an electronic platform allowing interested parties to fully participate while also allowing the public to independently view the public meeting and offer public comment. Under the circumstances, the electronic platform currently available is a safer alternative to face-to-face public participation. This determination will expire 30 days from today's date, and the Board, Division, and the Department of Natural Resources will evaluate the public health and safety conditions existing before the May 2021 public meeting and inform the public as to how that meeting will proceed as soon as possible. Now, today we have a rather full agenda, and I believe we have most of the board members present. Ms. Davis is excused from today's meeting, and we have one other that is on her way. What we will do, in the interest of time, I will turn the briefing session over to Holly to discuss the Environmental Excellence Award nomination presentations. If you'd like to go ahead, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the board. Like Mr. Hansen said, my name is Holly Brown, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And today we are going to be hearing the presentations from the 2021 Environmental Excellence Award nominations. Just a reminder to the presenters that each presentation should be no longer than 10 minutes because we do have 6 total. So with that, the first presentation will be by Kim Coburn, and she's with the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, and Wes Sherlock, who is with the U.S. Forest Service, the Manti-LaSalle area, and their presentation will be on the Dreamline, their compliance and outreach.
What else do I have to do to get this to present? Anyone hear me?
Yes, please go to your PowerPoint and open that up.
Just FYI, you are presenting right now. We can see your screen.
You can see my actual PowerPoint with the presentation because I can't see it yet.
Yeah, we're not seeing it here.
How do I go to open that up and bring it up? Kim, you know?
Do you have your PowerPoint opened up on your computer? We see your screen. We need you to open up the PowerPoint on your computer.
I don't have it saved here. I'll have to pull it out of the... Let's see.
Thank you, Kim.
Did you get it, Kim?
Kim, you're muted.
Hi, I have the presentation right here. Can everybody see it?
We can see it here.
Awesome.
There.
Great. Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Wes, who did the majority of the work. Thank you so much for hearing us today. We're talking about the Dreamline, also known as the Marvin Tunnel, with the operator known as Charles Pickens.
Kim, can you go to presentation mode? We're just seeing the PowerPoint display at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Looks good.
Wonderful. We also have Jet Salo here as well.
And you're going to have to step through them for me then, Kim?
Yep, I'm really more than happy to.
And you might want to do this slide as well, since.
Yeah, I nominated the Forest Service for the Dreamline project because they went above and beyond to keep the public safe when an operator reopened an abandoned mine without authorization. They officially coordinated with other agencies where they were able to get everyone out there within a week. And they also did outstanding final reclamation. And that included an innovative concrete settling dam. On our website, you'll be able to find out more information regarding this. I have the link here. But for right now, I'm going to turn over to Wes.
All right. The Marvin Tunnel Dreamline Complex is located in southeastern Utah, approximately 15 miles north of Blanding, which is about an hour and a half south of Moab. It's the actual mines here. The Dreamline is a historic mine. The Marvin Tunnel is a adit that was driven in about 500 feet vertical below that mine, hoping to hit a lower ore body, which they never really hit. The mine itself is directly alongside a road, our main forest road in the area, which is a large concern for us with people just walking into it. It's also immediately upstream or uphill from a perennial stream. You can go to the next slide, Kim. So the Marvin Tunnel, the lower pin there is where the Marvin Tunnel is, right next to that stream. Half mile down from that point is the water pickup for water diversion for Blanding City water supply. And the actual Dreamline itself is the upper pin. The original plan by the miners was to connect these underground as a haulage tunnel as well. That was never done. You can go on to the next slide, Kim. Overall history, the Dreamline was located in the late 1800s and operated intermittently until 1943 when the owner died. The gold recovery was by amalgamation cyanidization. Production costs exceeded recovery, so no mine anywhere in the district made money. The Marvin Tunnel is approximately 900 to 1,000 feet long and was constructed between 22 and 24. When they did not hit an ore body, it was abandoned. Next slide. The image there as well was in 2019 when he first opened that adit by hand. The operator, Charles Pipkin, has had multiple claims in the area. He also claims the Dreamline and a couple of other claims in the same general area on the forest. And go on to the next slide. This image is a portal after he had opened it by hand. This was in July 2019. He explored all the way to the back and was removing material by 5-gallon buckets by hand using his children as well. The drainage here is what was caught our eye almost immediately. And go to the next slide. The slide on July 2020 is where he had closed it off the year before. It had partially caved again. He put a plywood gate up there, a door, which somebody had broken into the top of it. And then in August, very next month, it looked as it does in this other image here, where he'd clearly taken a skid steer in and was in the process of seriously opening this thing up again. That caused a large release of fluid, effluent, mine effluent, into the perennial creek. Can you go to the next slide? And the far side there is some of the reddish water that was coming out. It was a sediment-laden water. And that's what got our attention right away, to get DEQ down, to get Kim down there. And we had County Health and Town of Blanding up there, all taking samples. The water samples from the water itself are basically meet drinking water standards. It's a very high pH system, so the pH is around 8.2. Therefore, dissolved metals can't be maintained in water. And the orange is all from sediments. It's a clay, metallic iron oxide sediment. And the sediment itself is high in other metals that would be dangerous. Hence, that's why the dam, we impound those within the mine. If you go on to the next slide. Originally, when he opened this thing up, we had him told him he had to put a door in. And actually, from 2019 on, he was told through official letters not to go in, not to do anything without a plan of operations being cleared through us. He ignored that, did the opening with the skid steer, and then installed this plywood door inside the mine. At this point, public safety concern as well as the water issues were first in my mind. Go on to the next slide. So we debated on how best to approach this, what was the quickest way to close the mine. We had a phone conference, including Kim and others from DEQ with the miner, and he agreed to let us do a permanent closure on this rather than him having the expense of doing it himself. And I managed to get a hold of the Forest Service closure team, Jason Rangenberg, and he managed to squeeze us into his schedule in December. It was after the first snow, and it took a day and a half to do the actual closure. But this was a complicated one because of the concrete dam, that keeping the sediment entrained inside this mine. I did just a rough calculation of how much sediment is currently behind that dam, and it's somewhere between 40 and 60 cubic yards that we don't want remobilizing down into the Blanding watershed. So I designed this closure with the dam to maintain the water behind it. The water overtops, but all of the sediment will have precipitated out prior to that, impounding the sediment behind, and the water that comes over top meets all the DEQ standards for the watershed. And this should be hopefully good enough to go for about 100 years. These mines also contain bats. We've done bat surveys here, and there are at least 7 species of bats that utilize this mine. So keeping the bat gates in place for them and keep the people out. When we went up there to do this closure, the snow on the ground had been fairly fresh. There was just a solid packed surface of footprints going into the mine. Everybody driving by there stopped and had to go in and check it out. So from a public safety point of view, this was a big one. From the optics, the public optics of red effluent coming out of a mine tunnel brings back the Gold King, visions of the Gold King and acid mine drainage. These mines are not acid. That's why this system, this passive system, will work. If it was an acid system, it would not. And if you want to go on the next slide, I think that's the last one, yeah. Our hope is that we will have mitigated this problem and that he won't attempt to go back in there, but if he does, then the bonding will be significant, as well as meeting all the regulations with DEQ and DOGM, as well as Forest Service. Yep.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate just how much the Forest Service went above and beyond. The rapid actions to be able to get everyone out there within a month, to be able to close it with in a season, to give the operator a chance to be able to close it on his own, to be able to get everyone working together was very, very impressive. along with their outstanding final reclamation, to be able to have everything settle out with the mine itself, with the concrete dam. We sent multiple letters, phone calls. With the operator, we haven't received any bonds, any permits. We sent him violations and fines, and we haven't seen a single dime yet. We would not have been able to close this mine until this spring at the very earliest here at the division. And we are just very thankful for our partners over at the Forest Service for just their quick response and them taking the lead on this project. So I guess I'll leave it with any questions.
Board members, do you have any questions for Ms. Coburn or Mr. Sherlock?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
So did I just hear you say that there is a concern that the operator may still want to work the mine? Is that what I heard?
He's expressed interest in doing so and has maintained the active claim, along with several other claims and new claims in the general area. But we can't stop him. I mean, if he wants to go back in, he could do it, but he'd have to be bonded for what we've put into the return. Plus, he has to get DEQ permits, all the dog permits, has to meet a plan of operations through us, and he'd have to comply with underground regulations with MSHA, which is very expensive. And he's on a limited income, a $20,000 a year annual fee from MSHA just for it belonging to the Underground Mine Rescue Program would probably be prohibitive for him to do it.
So, yeah, so I mean, you say we can't prohibit him from mining, but it sounds to me like we can. I mean, if he can't obtain the permits or authorization to go in there, it wouldn't be possible, would it?
Probably not. I mean, we're gonna rely on the state primarily for permitting. If he can't get permits, then he can't come to us with anything, with a plan of operations. And then with the plan of operations being on a main road, we could we could probably do something along the lines where he would have to go in from a different location and join the tunnel elsewhere for public safety. I think for this one we stopped, and for the one above we probably couldn't. The Dreamline.
Okay. Well,
but
thank you for. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we're relying on financial incentive for him not to do it.
All right. Well, I think this is a marvelous project. This is Mike Brown. I want to compliment everybody on the work. I am a little bit concerned about the operator re-entering, but that's a discussion for a different time and place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
This
The
is
next
Rich Borden. I also have a question.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry, Mr. Borden.
Yes. Could you tell us what is the flow of water that comes out? Is it a steady flow, and how many gallons per minute would you estimate it is from this adit?
It is a steady flow. It doesn't seem to change, but it's rather hard to judge, because whenever I've seen it before, it was either just filtering through the partial cave-in that created a dam. I would guesstimate somewhere around 4 to 5 gallons a minute. And with the dam in place now, we'll actually be able to get accurate measurements on that over seasons and verify that there is no variation seasonally, and I don't believe there is.
Okay, so if this ever were reopened again, that flow and the suspended sediments associated with it would have to be addressed as well at likely significant cost.
Right, it would have to be captured and processed or treated. And 40 to 60 cubic yards is a significant amount of that.
Yes. Great, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next presentation, which is Chris Rohr, who is a project manager with the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program. And his nomination is for the Skyline Mine for the refuse disposal site. And this was a public-private partnership yielding environmental improvement. So, Mr. Rohr, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, here. Okay, well, seems to be a couple seconds lag between the presentation and what I'm seeing on screen. Let's see, because I'm in presentation mode on my computer, but I'm apparently not on the window that you see.
It's not on.
Okay, let's try.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
If you remember from yesterday, we have to do your whole screen and then go into presentation mode.
I believe I did that. And so entire screen.
And we're still.
Okay. Okay, that is still.
Chris, you just want to go ahead with what you have?
Yeah, let's do it, even though it's a short slideshow, so.
Perfect.
Chris, we will inject the PowerPoint slide in just 15 seconds here.
Oh. So while we're waiting, I am very happy to be nominating Canyon Fuel Company and the Skyline Mine in particular for the award. As Holly said, it falls into the other category. We're not recognizing direct reclamation work that they perform themselves, but they provided in-kind support that made it possible for the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program to perform reclamation. So, all right.
Chris, the PowerPoint is now on screen.
Got it. Okay. So let's page down one, Michael. So the project that the Skyline Mine helped us out with was we called the Clear Creek Refuse Piles Project. It's located in Carbon County, about 5 miles south of the town of Schofield and about half a mile north of Clear Creek. Next slide, please. So there we go. So the Clear Creek mine was one of the bigger producers in the Schofield area. It operated from about the turn of the 20th century into the 1960s when it was abandoned. Here we see a photo from 1923, kind of looking over the operations, looking north. And the area that we dealt with would actually be kind of in the back of the frame behind the tipple, north of the mine site. Next slide. So in present day, when the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program came to the property, And this is kind of on the periphery of the actual operations. The program had actually reclaimed the main mine site in the 1980s, but for some reason we didn't deal with some coal refuse piles that were kind of on the edge of the site, outside of the main operational area. So when we got there, there were several coal refuse piles. For this presentation, we'll focus on the largest one, which had the most problems. This was an area covered in the floodplain of Mud Creek, which ironically, the creek that drains the area is Mud Creek, even though Clear Creek is the name of the mine and the name of the town. Don't ask me why. So in the floodplain of Mud Creek in the bottom of the canyon, there was coal refuse that had been dumped there and was about 6 feet deep overall. It had eroded with some fairly deep gullies that you can see in the photograph. And it was constrained in this area between State Road 96, which is on the east side of the canyon floor, and an abandoned railroad tracks and Mud Creek that are on the west side of the canyon floor. So in the upper left photo, looking north, the highway's on the right side, and the railroad tracks and Mud Creek are on the left side. Next slide, Michael. So this is looking south with Mud Creek on the right and the highway on the left at the kind of at the lower end of the property. And you can see that those gullies that we saw in the previous photos enter Mud Creek through a gap in the railroad embankment that Mud Creek has eroded. Mud Creek's basically channelized through here by the railroad embankment, but in the absence of any ongoing maintenance, it's reestablishing its original alignment and cutting meanders across the floodplain. So one of those meanders is cut through the railroad embankment right where the coal erosion gullies are. So it allows that coal to wash into the creek. So our concerns for the abandoned mine program for reclamation, the primary concern was water quality in Mud Creek because we're having coal refuse washing into the creek. Some secondary concerns are those gullies right next to the highway are deep and steep sided, and so they're a minor traffic safety hazard, and just generally the area is unsightly and not as attractive as it could be. So, next slide. Okay, so the reclamation approach that we chose was fairly simple in concept. We excavated the coal refuse to create an open trench. We brought in, which is what's happening in the upper left photo, we brought in clean fill to replace the coal that was excavated, which is the upper right photo. We shaped that into a broad open swale drainage channel. In the lower left, and lined it with rock riprap in the lower right. And since the drainage ditch was over-designed for the typical flows that come through there, we didn't want to leave a big white rock line channel next to the highway and high visibility. We covered the riprap with soil, so it'll be revegetated. So it'll just look like a grassy swale. But if there are high flows, we have the rock riprap underneath to protect the channel from severe erosion. So next slide, Michael. So the big problem that we were faced with was the coal refuse, because as we saw in the previous slide, the reclamation called for the coal refuse to be excavated. Typically, for our coal reclamation projects, when we're dealing with coal refuse, our first choice is to bury coal on site. That wasn't an option here because we're dealing with a very narrow site. We're stuck between the highway and the railroad and the creek, and there's just no place on site to bury the coal. Also, as we mentioned, Mud Creek is an active channel that is reasserting its alignment and cutting new meanders. So even if we had buried the coal on site in the floodplain, there is a good probability that over time the creek would cut new meanders and re-expose the coal, and we'd have another problem to deal with. So we definitely needed to move the coal off-site. In several previous projects where we've had large quantities of coal to dispose of, we've taken it to the Sunnyside Cogen plant, where they can burn it for fuel, which has the advantage of at least you're pulling some, getting some energy value recovered from waste coal. A second option is the East Carbon landfill. But both of those sites are over 70 miles away, so there'd be a tremendous cost and time investment in trucking the coal to that area. And so that kind of left us with finding a new place to put the coal, and that has its own problems. You have to locate a disposal site, find a landowner who's willing to have coal buried on their property. You may have to they may want to charge tipping fees. You have to go through all the administrative and legal hoops with cultural surveys and clearances and endangered species clearances and all the NEPA requirements for that property. So that was problematic in itself. So, we have this project, we have a lot of coal to get rid of, and we need to find a place to put it. So as the project manager, I picked up the phone and called the Skyline Mine, and without hesitation, they came to the rescue and said, sure, we'll take it. So next slide, Michael. So yeah, the Skyline Mine donated space at their refuse disposal site, which is right outside of Schofield in UP Canyon. So it had several advantages. First of all, it's an existing disposal site. There's no new disturbance created in taking additional coal there. It's kind of the principle that it's better to have one big waste pile than to have two little waste piles. So we were able to get rid of the coal without creating any new disturbance by having to build a new landfill site. Doing this expedited the planning significantly. We didn't have to do any clearances, plant surveys, bird surveys, cultural surveys, anything like that, because it's an existing facility. The haul distance from the reclamation site to the disposal site was very short, so 6.1 miles. So that led to tremendous cost savings in the trucking, because we didn't have a 70+ mile round each way haul for the material. And that led to time savings, because we could do about a 35 or 40 minute cycle to haul from the site to the disposal, from the reclamation site to the disposal and back, rather than, and get 10 trips per day, 15 trips per day even, instead of like 2 or 3 trips per day per truck. So that led to time savings, which was really important because we had to do this project late in the season during low water, and we're up in around 8,600 feet elevation. And so, the autumn is short, winter comes early. We were on the ground at the end of August, and by having that short haul, we were able to finish the project in about a month's time, which was really great. And we beat the snowfall, beat the bad weather. and got it done in time. My biggest fear on the project was leaving it uncompleted and over the winter and through the spring runoff, and having to come back in the summer to finish and have to fix erosion and things like that would have happened in the meantime. And the final advantage was because we were using an existing permitted disposal facility, we knew that there would be long-term stability. The mine has its permit obligations to reclaim the site when they cease operations, and we know that it will be, the coal that we put there will be taken care of and be treated in a responsible way for the long-term life of the facility. So, next slide, Michael. So here's the disposal facility at Skyline that they were very generous in allowing us to use, and they allowed us to use it at absolutely no fee. And there was never any hesitation on the mine's part. The planning for the project took a couple of years, and we went through a couple iterations of upper management at the mine, but every change in management was totally supportive of us using the disposal site. So I'm very grateful for that. And next slide. So here's just a couple before and after pairs showing what Skyline's participation in our project allowed us to do. On the left is the before, and on the right is the completion with the deep erosion gully in coal replaced by the gentle swale with the soil cover. That unfortunately the photos are from late fall last year, so we don't see the vegetation coming in. They're not pretty and green, but I think you can project how they'll turn out. And one more slide, Michael. Here's another view looking looking south from the north end of the site where the gully entered Mud Creek. On the left is the before, and on the right is the after, with the newly constructed swale gently entering the creek channel, lined with the erosion control netting to keep down the erosion until the vegetation gets established. So that's basically our project in a nutshell. I'm very appreciative of the Skyline Mine for going above and beyond in facilitating our project. I know Greg Galecki from the mine is on the line, and I will invite him to say a few words to get from the mine's perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Hey, I guess we at Skyline, we really appreciate being acknowledged, and we're always trying to be good stewards and good neighbors. And this isn't. There's been a couple of times that AML staff has come to us, trying to work out a project, and yes, we're more than willing to help out. Especially it's when you hear about needing to ship something 70 miles away when we were 6 months just right there, we really wanted to participate. I really want to, acknowledge Chris, that he and the staff are really professional. They're really knowledgeable and great to work with. And we are excited to be able to actually, finally collaborate on a project. I guess it's too often that both division and industry, aren't viewed in the most favorable light, and so it's great when we can work together and, we can do good things, good stewardship projects. And then the last thing is that, we'd really be honored to receive the award, and we appreciate Chris's efforts. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris and Greg. Board members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on to the next presentation. In the interest of time, the board hearing starts at 10 o'clock. At least that's the scheduled time. So if we can reduce the amount of time on these presentations, I apologize. We had allowed 10 minutes apiece, but they seem to be going a little bit long. So so the next presentation is Nicholas Lott with American Gilsonite Company for their Bonanza site, and they are in the Outstanding Reclamation or Site Restoration nomination category. Mr. Lott, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. See if we can make this work here. Can everybody see this?
Yes, we can see it here.
Perfect. All right, just one second. Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity, certainly to present before the board and the rest of the folks on this call, and especially to represent American Gilsonite Company in this nomination. Just a brief overview, American Gilsonite Company has been in business in the Uinta Basin for over 110 years and was pivotal to the development and expansion of Vernal and the rest of the Uinta Basin during the early 1900s. Throughout the years, American Gilsonite has been amongst the larger employers in the basin for most of that time. And AGC mines a material called Uintaite, which has been marketed by the company under the trademark Gilsonite, which is what everybody knows. Gilsonite is shipped all over the world and is used in the oil and gas industry for drilling fluids and cementing, as well as used in foundries, asphalt applications, and in the inks and paints industry. Gilsonite mining and processing does not produce any toxic waste. AGC sells 100% of the material that is extracted from the mine, thus resulting in a zero waste operation and no mine tailings from our process or our mining. So historical markets for Uintaite are on the decline due to heavy competition from international asphalt type providers and a steady decline in the U.S. oil and gas industry, as well as recently in 2020, the impacts associated with COVID-19. Now, the reason for this information on this slide is to really kind of frame out the company's position, and as you can imagine, the challenges that the company has faced in freeing up cash for these reclamation activities. Aside from the reclamation obligations that we discuss regularly with the division, over the last 5 years, AGC has went above and beyond by undertaking 2 major reclamation projects on its own accord. The first was in 2016, which was following the purchase of the Ziegler assets, which included a significant amount of past reclamation requirements that had went back decades. We saw that project and undertook it in 2016 at one of the low points of the company. The second project in 2020 was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you can see it was another low point for the company. And if you look at the graph, you can see that both of these events occurred at low times of the company, and during those times, between the two of them, American Gilsonite spent over $600,000 to reclaim areas and especially to maintain and support employment during these difficult times within the company. Since our primary market is in the oil and gas industry, the economics of the Uinta Basin follow the same pattern as you see up there. So although cash was tight during the periods, AGC took no shortcuts in reclamation during the 2 major events, and has done an outstanding job of bringing several older mine sites to 100% complete reclamation status. In fact, we've done more reclamation in the last 5 years than had been done in the company's previous 20 years. In 2020 specifically, as you see, reclaimed over 20% of the company's total reclamation obligations. That's in federal, state, and patented fee land, all in 1 year. We targeted 14 total locations, of which 9 full mine sites were reclaimed with just the re-veg existing after time. The inspection from the division is all went extremely well, with high regards to the quality of the reclamation that has been performed. And every one of the reclamation locations that was submitted passed the inspection and were all authorized for bond release this year. So a couple areas where AGC maintains environmental excellence during these times is ensuring that the reclamation is performed beyond the expectations of the regulations in the division. We mine gilsonite in vertical veins with a shaft every 1,000 feet along that vein. With historical veins running for tens of miles, you can imagine the number of shafts throughout the vein that have been capped and how critical it is that this is done well. Historically, shafts were allowed and were approved to be capped on the surface with a concrete cap over the existing concrete shaft collar, or the cap just placed on the surface really to eliminate the hazard of that open shaft. Of course, that results in a protruding concrete on the surface, visible to anybody around, and allows for deterioration due to weather, rodents burrowing down underneath them, and et cetera. So we've taken and went above and beyond the regulation by further busting up the concrete around the collar, removing the unconsolidated surface material down to bedrock, sealing any cracks that would exist between that collar and the uneven bedrock, and placing the seal back over the caps to complete a 100% reclamation in these areas. For seed germination, previously we would seed the area, do it in the optimal time of the year for the expected rains and to support best regrowth, but would not put any straw or water down. And this last year we invested in additional time and material to place straw in the reclamation, work it into the ground, and to frequently water the area. And we're already seeing some regrowth specifically in those areas that we targeted for that, and have seen some success already the first part of this year. So just a couple additional measures for environmental excellence. On our seed mixes, we always coordinate both with the state and the BLM to ensure concurrence between the two before ordering the seed mix. We provide multiple bins at the locations to allow the separation of debris from metal for recycling to be separated, which at today's rates is really not providing much of a benefit, but it does support recycling and sustainability. And then laying down additional starter fertilizer, and we've purchased discs and spreaders and everything that we know that can support that seed germination even further. So although we have supplied this under outstanding site reclamation, we've been commended several times by the agency on how outstanding our reclamation has been, both in the 2016 event as well as the program in 2020. But the real strength of this program is the ability to maintain a workforce during some of the most trying times in the company's history, both in 2016 and 2020. In 2020, with the unique circumstances surrounding the pandemic, this reclamation project allowed work to be performed outside with social distancing in place to support CDC recommendations. This program also allowed AGC to keep employees working at a time when without it, there would not have been work for the employees. So it's also allowed AGC to support the Uinta Basin during its difficult times as well. And fortunately, the owners of American Gill Sand understand the bigger picture in supporting environmental sustainability and supporting its employees and the community in which they live in. So just to conclude, I'd like to thank everybody within the division, especially April Labate, who we work directly with in the reclamation and everything. Certainly the board for allowing the opportunity to present this material, and I strongly suggest that the board take into consideration, even though it's not specifically a category, for the reclamation being able to maintain employment with the company. I strongly suggest that both the outstanding site reclamation and site restoration, as well as maintaining employees during difficult times, are both taken into account with this consideration. So thank you. That's all I have. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Board members, do you have any questions? Rich,
Yes.
or Mr. Borden, yes.
This is Rich Borden. Just I'm interested in the concrete caps that you put in over the shafts. How thick is that concrete, and is it rebarred, or I'm just asking because I'm very curious how you do that.
Yes, generally they're 12 inches thick and they are strongly rebarred. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, board members? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next presentation, which is Chris Stimler with MPLX for their Utah Gathering and Processing Facility in the environmental improvement to an active mine site, drilling, or recovery site. Mr. Stimler, I will turn the time over to you.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to get my presentation going. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to thank the board for consideration of MPLX's OGI Best Management Program in the Uinta Basin. So just a little overview. MPLX operated 1 gas processing facility and 11 compressor stations in the Uinta Basin in 2020. Of these facilities, only 3 are required to have a leak detection and repair program, and all these facilities are located in a non-attainment zone for ozone. So us trying to capture these ultra-organic compound emissions is really important to help reduce the impact of ozone in the air. And as you can see, a lot of these sites are about an hour and a half away from the vernal area. So it takes a little bit of time to get out there and do these surveys. For my overview, so this really hinges on our environmental tech, Megan Horrocks, and who's based out of our vernal office, and she's a level 2 thermographer responsible for performing camera monitoring at all of our Utah GMP facilities. We've undertaken these voluntary efforts since 2015 when Megan was first hired, and she's really passionate about finding these leaks and preventing emissions to the atmosphere, VOC and methane. For the 8 compressor stations not subject to NSPS quota away, MPLX has been monitoring quarterly and finding and fixing these leaks similar to the regulation and trying to fix them within 30 days. And then for our iron horse gas processing facilities, we've been performing quarterly monitoring, finding and fixing the large leaks, including on our non-regulated lines of containing methane for sales that go to our homes in Utah. Our leak reduction is pretty impressive. So in 2020, we found 202 leaks that would not have been found under our current facility regulations. And that's a potential reduction of 75% in 2020 just on the leak emissions from about 249,000 pounds to 62,615 pounds, just by treating all these leaks as regulated, going out there, doing these best monitoring practices of using the camera, which is we feel is the best tool for that process, finding leaks and fixing them. So based off EPA's GHG equivalency calculator, this is the equivalent of a cars not driving about 5 million miles for the year, and the amount of carbon sequestered by 2,599 acres of forest area. Some benefits of the program, we can efficiently use the infrared camera to find facilities, the large leaks that really account for the majority of our annual emissions. We can quickly identify if the monitoring technicians are actually monitoring equipment at our Iron Horse facility, and we've found pipeline leaks during this area. It's under one of the facilities that was not previously detected and allows for a safe startup of our facility to ensure leaks are fixed under lower temperature and pressure, making it easier and safer to operate. And here's a couple of leak videos. So this is that pipeline leak we were talking about. It's coming up through the secondary containment under this tank wall, and we were just searching through, and we scanned everything just to be sure and found this pipeline leak, which we then took out of service to stop the maintenance. We didn't need it. Here's also a small leak. So this is in the naked eye, just looking at the valve and the PRV, and as you can tell, there's a pretty small leak there that's emitting to the atmosphere that wouldn't have been found under the current regulations facility, and this would be emitting. And then this last leak is the connector leak on a valve, and this is pretty high pressure, so not only just environmental concern, but a safety concern we're able to find. And with that, I will take any questions.
Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Stimler? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Stimler, for your presentation.
All right, thank you.
Moving on, we have Chad Wilding with Dominion Energy for their Dominion Energy Questar pipeline system and their methane emissions reduction program. Mr. Wilding, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I just need to get my screen shared here. Can you see my screen yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, here we go.
Now we can see it.
Okay. My name is Chad Wilding. I work for Dominion Energy Questar Pipeline here in Salt Lake City. I'll be presenting today for our submission for this Environmental Excellence Award. I thank the board for your consideration and this opportunity to share about our methane emission reduction program. Just as a quick outline, I'll share a little background about Dominion Energy and then focus on our environmental commitments, including our methane reduction program, and then I'll provide some brief examples prior to concluding the presentation. About Dominion Energy, we're an integrated energy company operating both electric and natural gas utilities. On this slide, I'm just showing our west profile where we have solar farms providing electric generation in California and Utah, as well as regional gas transmission, regulated gas distribution, and we also have underground storage and some exploration and production of natural gas within Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado. Focusing a little bit more about Dominion Energy West, everyone's probably pretty familiar with our distribution company, Dominion Energy Utah, as well as Wexpro, which provides development and production. For this presentation, I'll focus mainly on Dominion Energy Questar Pipeline, which is a regional interstate natural gas transmission pipeline and underground storage operator in Utah, Southwest Wyoming, and Western Colorado. For the remainder of the presentation, I will refer to Dominion Energy Questar Pipeline as DEQP. So one of Dominion Energy's core values is environmental stewardship. As part of this environmental stewardship, Dominion Energy has made major reductions in carbon and methane emissions in the past few years, and we've also established a bold new target, which is net zero carbon dioxide and methane emissions for both our electric and gas operations by 2050. So as we work towards this net zero methane emissions by 2050 goal, we'll focus on our near-term progress on reducing our methane emissions from our maintenance activities. Dominion Energy plans to reduce methane emissions by 65% by 2030 and up to 80% by 2040 when compared to its 2010 levels. Shifting from that larger 2050 goal, I'll focus the rest of this discussion on DEQP's methane reduction program. Our program consists of modifying infrastructure, improving systems, and several voluntary initiatives. Later in this presentation, I'll highlight 4 examples from our program that include use of flares to combust natural gas and portable compression to recompress natural gas that would be otherwise vented. DEQP is committed to reducing its methane emissions and meeting the larger goal of net zero emissions established by our corporation. We recognize that these efforts benefit both the environment and our customers by keeping natural gas in the pipeline all the way to the end users. We also participate with other natural gas pipeline operators in the Environmental Protection Agency's Methane Challenge and Natural Gas Star programs, which are focused on reducing methane emissions from pipeline systems. So in 2019 and each year going forward, DEQP established methane emission reduction goals. We set a target of 50% in 2019 and increased that target to 75% for both 2020 and 2021. On this slide, you can see that we were able to achieve 86% and 90% reductions in 2019 and 2020 for methane emissions during our maintenance activities. We're actively working to achieve our 2021 goal. So I'll now share some examples that we performed in the past that allow us to meet our methane emission reduction targets. So for my first example, I'll discuss about line drawdown with a low pressure system. DEQP is interconnected with several downstream customers and gas users. We had a 24-inch pipeline that required a minor replacement repair in Summit County, Utah in 2020. We performed a temporary repair to make the pipeline safe and then scheduled a shutdown to complete a permanent repair. To reduce methane emissions, we first isolated the pipeline and allowed the downstream users to consume the gas and draw down the pressure. So you can see from this chart where that line drawdown occurred, approximately about 420 PSI down to 50 PSI, where we were at equilibrium with the downstream system. We then performed the shutdown, made the repair, and brought the pipeline back into service. And doing it this way allowed us to achieve an 87% reduction in methane had we otherwise just vented the gas. We've been performing storage well workovers as part of our larger storage integrity management program. In order to reduce methane emissions during our well workover operations, we've been connecting a flare to combust the methane or the natural gas to carbon dioxide, which has a much lower greenhouse gas potential than methane. For the past couple of years, we've been able to achieve a 95% and 88% reduction of natural gas vented. Additionally, we had a pipeline that we had to perform a small replacement to relieve stress resulting from underground mining subsidence. We again connected a flare to de-energize the pipeline prior to performing that repair, or excuse me, that replacement. Another strategy we like to employ is to use portable compression to recompress gas back into the pipeline. 2020, we performed an inline inspection on a pipeline that traversed Summit and Davis counties, Utah. In the bottom right corner here, you can see a ZVAC unit, which is a zero emissions vacuum and compression unit. We use this unit to recompress natural gas that was trapped in our tool, or is contained in our tool traps prior to loading and receiving the tool. And this allowed us to achieve an 86% reduction in methane that would have normally been vented to the atmosphere by recapturing it back into the pipeline. For my final example, I'd like to draw attention to how planning multiple activities in a coordinated shutdown can result in a methane reduction. We had a 10-inch pipeline in Summit County, Utah, and Uinta County, Wyoming, where we had planned to perform some delivery tap upgrades, which would have required a shutdown. We also had a lot of other work we needed to do that we recognized while we were in the planning phase for this shutdown, which included modifying the line for inline inspection and removing inactive taps. Instead of trying to do those projects disjointed, we deferred the 2019 work into 2020 and completed all that maintenance work in one coordinated shutdown, which allowed us to minimize our methane emissions. We again used that line drawdown strategy, but sometimes it's not always easy to connect all this work with a pipeline that might go across the state boundaries and affect a lot of different groups. But this is a good opportunity of how you can kind of minimize your impact to the environment. So in conclusion, we're actively working towards achieving Dominion Energy's larger net zero emissions goal in the present, with the focus on reducing our methane emissions through maintenance activities. Our approach is integrated and comprehensive. It considers both large and small sources, as shown in the examples for line drawdown and use of portable compression. I've also shared some different examples with flaring that help us to achieve our overall goal of reducing our methane emissions and environmental impact from our pipeline maintenance activities. So thank you for your time today and consideration, and I'm free to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilding. Board members, do you have any questions? Mr. Borden.
Yes, not a question, but a comment. I just want to commend both of the last two presenters on these efforts that reducing methane emissions. It has so many benefits. It gives that material, allows that material to be saved for use in many cases, to put to beneficial use for energy generation. It does improve local air quality, and methane is a greenhouse gas that's 30 times more powerful than CO2. So even the flaring where we convert that methane to carbon dioxide is a net win. So again, I just want to commend both of the previous presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borden. The last presentation, are there any other questions before I move on? Okay, seeing none. The last presentation will be by Casey McKee with Karis Uinta LLC for final reclamation or site restoration in the Greater Natural Buttes project. Mr. McKee, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let me pull it up here just a minute. I have it pulled up, but I'm not.
We are not seeing it.
Okay, just a minute. I'm not sure how to get it pulled up here.
Mr. McKee, in the bottom right corner, there's a Present Now button in the Google Meet screen. You're going to choose that and then choose a window. And then from there, choose your PowerPoint presentation and hit Share Now.
Okay. There it is. Okay.
We're still not seeing it. Oh, here it comes. Okay, we're seeing it now. You're going to want to go into presentation mode.
Yep. Okay. My name is Casey McKee. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for letting me present today for this Environmental Excellence Award. I am a graduate of Utah State University and I'm a certified crop advisor and I'm employed by Caris Uinta LLC Oil and Gas. So here at Caris, we have two main reclamation goals, which we are trying to achieve. Our first goal, or our long-term goal for reclamation, is to facilitate an ecosystem reconstruction to establish a self-perpetuating stable plant community. The second goal, or short-term goal, is to immediately stabilize disturbed areas and to provide the necessary conditions to achieve the long-term goal. To achieve our reclamation goals, we have 8 different objectives. I'm going to focus mainly on the first one, but I will touch on several other objectives as I go along in the presentation. So our objective 1 is to establish a desired self-perpetuating diverse plant community. The objective is to obtain 75% basal cover based on similar undisturbed adjacent native vegetation community and comprised of diverse species or desired species and or seeded species within 5 years of initial reclamation action. However, if after 3 years of growing season, there is less than 30% of basal cover based on similar undisturbed native vegetation community, then the authorized officer may require additional seeding efforts. So like I said, I'm going to focus mainly on the first objective. Well, how do you establish a desired self-perpetuating diverse plant community? So there's 6 different things which we use here in Caris in the agrarian attributes to obtain that. The first is soil surface roughening. Second, soil plant available nutrients and organic matter. 3, base saturation, toxicity levels, and soil pH. And number 4, custom seed mix diversity. 5, timing and implementation of seed mixes, soil amendments, and organic matter. And 6, vegetation monitoring. So installation and incorporation of surface roughening techniques are used to break up compacted soils, allowing space for water, air, and nutrients and seed can collect and absorb for better overall germination of our native seed mix. Some compacted soils can decrease seed germination when compacted by heavy equipment during reclamation. These types typically have a higher clay versus sand and silt and can comprised of compacted layers, making it hard for water, air, and beneficial plant nutrients, cations, to absorb into the soil. So different examples that we use for surface roughening techniques is those are tread twisting, pocking, free-form roughening, and ripping. Soil plant nutrients and organic matter. Due to the topsoil piling and vegetation, if any, only persisting in the first 6 inches of topsoil, over time, that topsoil becomes more of a subsoil, losing a lot of the organic matter deep down in the topsoil pile. Also, microorganisms that may help to break up that organic matter is also lost, thus resulting in loss of macro and micronutrients. So on the side over here is an excerpt of a soil test that I had taken on one of our reclamation sites. And just looking at that, you can see the amount of different cations that we have or different plant nutrients available in the soil. Typically, we are very high in sodium, which is usually a big problem. We're typically low in ammonium and nitrate. Phosphorus is always low. Potassium is high. Calcium is high, and that plays a very important part into reducing the toxic levels of sodium later on. Zinc is low. Iron typically it can be low or medium, sometimes high, but is usually not available to plants due to it being not a chelated iron. Magnesium is low, copper. And on the other side where it says recommendations, pounds per nutrients per unit per acre, is the recommendations from the soil test lab on what we could amend the soil with to improve those macro and micronutrients that plants need for good germination. So soil plant nutrients and organic matter, by tailoring the amount of compost based off of compost tissue analysis, we can effectively supply our reclamation sites with good organic matter and nutrients recommended for peak native seed germination and vegetation establishment. So on this other side is a tissue analysis from our compost, from our seeders that I sent in and had taken so I could see the levels of macro and micronutrients that is available to us when we apply this to our reclamation sites. And I'm able to tailor this compost to what the recommended recommendations based on the slide before that our soil our soil lab recommends. And so I'm able to take that and amend that. So our base saturation and toxicity levels and soil pH can be a really big problem in our soils here in the Unit Basin. Typically, if you want to look in over here, it's this exact excerpt from the same soil test. You can see our pH is a pH of 8.8. That's very high, but I've seen it as high as 10.5 to a little bit higher than that. Our salts are always extremely high. If you come down here where it says base saturation percentage, down at the bottom it says sodium. We have 22.3. An ideal, or the soil test lab's ideal percentage is 3. And so you can see how high we are in salts. So in order to combat those salts and combat that pH, there's things that we can use, such as gypsum or Lml Sulfur, to facilitate the leaching of sodium down into the soil past the root depth. And also incorporation of humic acid into our soil amendment mix helps free up needed nutrients like magnesium, iron, calcium, and other cations that are needed for good plant establishment. So these are just some pictures. The one picture with the guy with the hand is holding that's our Lml Sulfur mix, and that's a mixture of Lml Sulfur, zinc, and humic acid. What humic acid does is it helps unlock nutrients that's already in the soil. And like I said before, the Lml Sulfur helps over time to knock the salt off the soil and facilitate that leaching of the salt down into the soil profile, hopefully beneath where our roots can absorb that salt. Next thing we need to do is we need to look at our custom seed mix diversity. In order to develop a custom seed mix that is diverse in species native to the reclamation area, you first must know the vegetation community of the site. So here in the garden attributes, we have developed 8 custom seed mixes that can meet the diverse vegetation communities that exist throughout our field. These seed mixes have been approved by both BLM, BIA, and SITLA. You can see the list of our different seed mixes. We have a saltbrush community mix, a desert grass community mix, a black sage community mix, an alkaline soil community mix, and a saltbrush and grassland mix. We also have 2 tribal mixes, one for near the river, the White River. It's typically where most of our areas on the tribe are, and another seed mix for tribal for every other location on tribe. We also have a low book cliff mix, and that's our state mix. That's a saltbrush and desert grass mix. Here is option 1, BLM option 1, and that's our seed tag. So you can read down, look at the different species, and then here is a picture of the seed mix itself, so you can see the diverse species seeds in that seed mix. Timing and implementation of the seed mix and soil amendments and organic matter is a very crucial point for good seed germination and vegetation establishment. There are several factors to consider before implementation can occur, and these are soil moisture, soil temperature, and season of year. And last, our objective 8 is to conduct a monitoring that is able to assess the attainment or failure of the reclamation action. We use 2 different types of methods to conduct that monitoring. First one is a line point intercept, and the second is a step point intercept. Both of them use the first one uses 100 feet measuring tape, and the second one uses 100 times. You're stepping 100 times and counting each step as a point. In conclusion, Karis Junta's goal for implementing a more science-based advantage seeding method into our reclamation practices is to establish a diverse, self-perpetuating plant community that will reduce the time needed for a final abandonment notice approval by the different regulatory land agencies, BLM, SITLA, and BIA. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Board members, do you have any questions? Mr. Moon.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment you on the presentation and all the work you're doing. I have cattle permits on BLM and SITLA, and we have private ground, and I see a lot of old locations that have just turned to halogeton for whatever reason. All the things you talked about, there's a lot of variables, and especially I like that follow-up where you follow up and see how successful the reclamation was. I think a lot of times that doesn't happen, and so there's nothing learned from the failed attempt to reclaim land. On the other hand, there are a lot of good locations where there's good reclamation and good revegetation, and so anyway, appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Moon. Ms. Garrison?
I just had a quick question. If you were to go off the disturbed area onto the natural, undisturbed area, would that soil be high in salt like you're finding on the disturbed area also?
Typically, we have higher salts on a disturbed area because when we're reclaiming that site, often subsoil, where most of your salt is mixed in with that topsoil from our topsoil pile. It's not something that we try to do, but it happens. And so a lot of those salts get actually placed at or near the surface within that site. So you typically have higher salts on your reclaimed area.
Thank you.
Mr. Borden.
Yes. How many acres have you actually applied these best practice reclamation techniques to thus far?
Well, so last year we did 115 acres, and that was spread out amongst, I don't know, roughly about 200,000 square miles. And so, or 200,000 acres. But we've been applying these methods for the past several years now. And we've had, like, for instance, we had one location last year that we was able to get a fan on after one growing season. So that particular site has reached, I think it was almost 100% revegetation within 1 year.
That's great. Thank you.
And Mr. Brown.
Thank you. I just want to echo Gordon's comments. As an old miner, I've been involved in a lot of seeding projects through the years, and I've never seen this kind of attention paid to a reclamation seeding project. And I just want to offer my compliments and your example for others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you to all the presenters for taking the time to come and give us their environmental excellence nominations today. This afternoon, there will be a working lunch where the board members will vote on who will actually receive the awards. That meeting is open to the public and is streamed on this YouTube link that we used for the briefing session. So if you'd like to join us, feel free. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn the time back over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, and thank you, presenters, for those presenting those nominations, and your slide presentations. They're informative and educational, and we appreciate you taking the time to do so. Because we have, we need to start the hearing portion of our board agenda today. I think we will delay the remaining items on the briefing session until after we've completed our hearing. And not sure what time that'll be, but if you'd like to rejoin us, the public would like to rejoin us after the hearing portion, I assume that'll be later this afternoon, so that you can hear the remaining items on the briefing. But at this time, what we'll do is we'll take about a 5-minute break and then resume 10:35 to begin the hearing portion of today's board hearing. With that, we'll go off the record and be back in about 5 minutes.